Normally, we would hold a public information session like this in person, usually at the community center. And that was our original plan until things changed dramatically in March of 2020. So due to COVID-19, all village meetings are now held virtually using the Zoom application. And while Zoom is not as ideal as a face-to-face meeting, we're happy to be able to offer you this opportunity to safely gather and discuss the important issue of affordable housing in a public forum. As already mentioned, we will be recording the staff presentations portion of the meeting, and we will be saving questions until the end just so that we can get through our timing tonight. So the purpose of tonight's information meeting, is to begin to gather the public's opinions on how the village might address housing affordability. So tonight's session is considered a kickoff to a much larger process of updating our official community plan, the document that guides local government decision-making on how our community will grow. The process of reviewing and updating an official community plan takes about 2 years and addresses a range of community matters such as land use, transportation, housing, sustainability, and the impacts of climate change. This process involves a lot of public engagement as it addresses so many topics that affect your quality of life. And therefore, you can look forward to more conversations like this. As part of the OCP review, staff will be looking at a number of ways to make housing more affordable and attainable for residents of Pemberton. This may include introducing new or different kinds of housing. In other words, we may see some changes to housing forms that could impact the character of our village. So for this reason, it's important that we check in with you and get a sense of your willingness or tolerance for changes that could impact you, but could also greatly benefit the community at large. So tonight, this is what you can expect. Staff will share some information on what the village is doing around the issue of affordable housing. And then we will showcase a number of housing options that are on the table for discussion. So afterwards, in an effort to make this session as interactive as possible, we'll conduct a few polls throughout the presentation, and we will offer time at the conclusion for questions and answers. So we'd ask you to please hold your questions until the end of our presentation, just in an effort to keep a timely presentation here tonight. And if we don't have a chance to answer all your questions, we have some other methods whereby you can get us your feedback. So the views that we hear will help guide staff's analysis of our options and inform our next steps. As I mentioned, this is the first of many discussions that will span the entire timeline of the OCP review. No decisions will be made until we are way further down the process. We are simply at an information gathering stage. So let's begin. I thought I'd start by getting a sense of where you're coming from tonight and the main reason that you chose to join us. So we're going to just do a couple of short polls, and Nikki Segovia is going to run those for us. So the first poll is asking, where do you live? So your choices are Village of Pemberton, outside the village in the Squamish-Lillooet Regional District or Area C. You live in a neighboring First Nations community, or you're maybe from Whistler, Squamish, or beyond. So you just, I believe, Nikki, click on your response, and then we will be able to show the answers. And then the second poll is, what is your main reason for attending? Perhaps you're doing okay for housing right now, but things could change, so you'd like to learn more. Maybe you're desperate to find affordable housing now, or you may have to leave our community. Or maybe you're aware that the village is working on this issue, but want to learn more. Or perhaps you're skeptical that the village is even addressing this issue at all, but you're open to listen. And then your final response could be, there was nothing else happening. It's COVID. So I guess we are tabulating the results now, and we'll just run through.
3 more answers.
Pardon me?
We're waiting for 3 more answers.
Oh, okay. What if people choose not to participate in the poll?
We'll give them 10 more seconds to figure it out.
Okay, you have 10 more seconds. Excuse me. All right. So we have our responses here. So 70% of you joining us tonight are from the Village of Pemberton, 15% from outside of Pemberton. In the SLRD, we have 2 people or 6% from a neighboring First Nation and 3 people or 9% from Whistler, Squamish and beyond. Well, anyways, wherever you're from, welcome. We're glad you're here. And in terms of what is your main reason for attending, looks like about 18% are doing okay for housing, but they realize things could change. Ooh, 27% feel they're very desperate to find affordable housing now, or they may have to leave. That's not good to know. But it is great to see that almost half of you are aware that the village is working on this issue and you want to learn more. And we have a few people who don't believe we're doing anything, but hopefully we can convince you otherwise. So thank you for that. I guess, Nikki, you'll turn that poll off and I'll switch to my next slide. All right, so are you able to remove that poll or do I have to do that manually?
You can just exit out of it so it doesn't.
Okay, sorry. All right, so is Pemberton affordable? Well, we're aware that there is a problem with affordability in Pemberton, but just how bad is it? A few years ago, Pemberton was in the top 20% of the most expensive communities in Canada and consistently trends much higher than the provincial average in terms of housing costs. In 2019, the village undertook an updated background study to gain understanding of the current situation. We learned that housing prices have increased significantly over the last 3 years and that local businesses are suffering because of how difficult it is to attract and retain employees given our housing situation. Between 2008 and 2018, single detached home sale prices increased 56%, reaching a peak median of about $830,000 in 2018. And I know it's higher than that now. This data is, from a couple of years ago. And that in the same 10-year time period, townhouse sales sales prices increased 89% and apartment prices increased 99%. So it's looking pretty dire in, if you're having trouble affording housing in Pemberton. So through our background study, we also confirmed that there are gaps in our housing supply and that we confirmed that the lack of affordable options is especially hard on seniors seeking to age in place, low-income families, and low-income households and working families with children. However, this trend is not unique to Pemberton. Communities across the Sea to Sky are struggling with housing availability and affordability. But what might be considered unique about Pemberton's situation is the amount of physical constraints that we face, such as the floodplain, the lands within the agricultural land reserve, and the topographical conditions, i.e. steep slopes that limit the amount of land available for affordable housing projects and thus greatly increases the cost of land and development here. So what do we mean when we use the term affordable housing? For our purposes, we define affordability as housing that a single person or a household can afford to rent or purchase without spending more than 30% of their before tax income. This 30% measurement is a common standard for defining affordability both nationally and provincially. It's also important to consider the concept of a housing continuum. Basically, what this refers to is there is a spectrum or a range of housing types available in any certain community. from emergency shelters at one end all the way to home ownership on the other. In between lies an assortment of housing options and types, each critical for different people at different times in their life cycle. In Pemberton, we only have a few of the types shown on the housing continuum. We have a small amount of subsidized housing in terms of the Lions Villa, which is geared towards seniors and persons with disabilities. We have a limited number of market rentals, for example, the Radius development. But mainly we have market home ownership options of townhouses, stacked townhouses, apartments, and single family dwellings. So the village is aware there are gaps in our housing supply, and we are trying to facilitate a broader range of options, which in turn translates into more attainable choices. So at this point, we're going to do another quick poll, and then I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Cameron. So for this poll, we are going to ask, in your opinion, who do we need to prioritize in terms of affordable housing? So which groups that we've listed here do you feel are the most important that we should be working to address their housing needs? Thank you for answering. I'll just wait till everybody's finished.
Give it 10 more seconds.
All right, 10 more seconds to give us your feedback on who do we need to house. Okay, so it looks as though employees of Pemberton businesses comes out on top. And we did find this in our research. Families with young children is next, followed by seniors and some single professionals, as well as the homeless are hard to house. So thank you again for sharing your feedback on that question. So I am going to turn it over to Cameron Chalmers now, and he's going to speak about this next slide.
Thank you, Lisa. Again, my name's Cameron Chalmers. I'm a planning consultant. I live in Pemberton, and among other clients, I work with the Village of Pemberton on a whole range of planning matters. And one of them has been some of this policy work around affordable housing, housing options, what the growth of the community might look like to make it more attainable and affordable for people to live here, focusing largely on the people who already do. One of the things that's important to keep in mind as we have this conversation is that there really are three levels of government that like to tell each other that others are responsible for housing issues. It's one of those kind of bouncing ball issues that does involve all three levels of government. And of course, tonight we'll be focusing mostly on the municipal level and what the Village of Pemberton can do to promote more affordable and attainable housing. But just in terms of backdrop, the federal government does have some very significant housing programs, but as you can expect, those apply across the country. And one of the things about affordable housing that we know, and even in this corridor, is that it's very context specific. You know, affordable housing in Whistler has been a big issue for a long time. And there's a very well established way of dealing with housing for people in Whistler that's been around for many, many, many years. Other communities in other parts of the country certainly don't have the upward pressure on real estate values that we have here. So the federal government does, however, have a number of significant programs, most of which are run through the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, or CMHC. And that body really, a lot of us kind of in my generation were exposed to it when we bought our first homes, because that's the level of government that insured mortgages, so we didn't have to put as much money down as a down payment. And they insured the mortgage so that if there was a default, there was a pot of money to pay off the bank. More recently, the federal government has made a significant investment to help individual project level affordable housing, as well as some studies and some research. And I believe last year, the amount of money available for affordable housing projects to help them get financed and built, because we'll talk about it in a second, but that's the challenge with affordable housing, is that someone has to build it and someone presumably has to make profit from it. So they provide funding for affordable qualifying projects. And last year, I believe they had about $13.7 billion to spend across the country. So that's a program we haven't seen much application yet in Pemberton, but there are certainly examples in the corridor and throughout the province of federally funded affordable housing projects. The province has a similar program through BC Housing. They do offer a range of programs through that organization. Specifically, they do rent supplement programs. They, of course, run the residential tenancy branch, which also ensures that it provides protection for people seeking housing. When it comes directly to affordable housing, BC Housing also does provide financing options for qualifying affordable projects. And often they work closely with the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation to deliver on the ground projects. So actual buildings that people could actually live in. One of the things that's important to municipalities is that over the last number of years, the province has made it clear that each municipality has to take on a larger role in providing housing in its own context. And they've done that in a number of ways. One of them, they've given municipalities certain powers through the development approvals process, because every municipality is a creature of the province. And so a lot of the rules and processes that the municipality employs are empowered only by provincial legislation. So what they've done is they've given the municipality more tools to do things like zone property for rental, to negotiate amenity agreements, to minimize other charges and other things for affordable projects. And a lot of what we'll be talking about tonight are things that come from those powers directly. So that's an acknowledgement that the province has, whereas a lot of 20 years ago, we used to tell the province that housing people was their issue. And they do a lot of that, but they start at one end of the spectrum. They really start at the hardest to house, subsidized and social housing, homelessness. Those are bigger provincial initiatives that they fund directly. And what we often talk about when we talk about affordable housing, particularly in this corridor, is just like we saw in the survey results. People who are trying to work an honest living and live in a town. Seniors who want to stay in the town that they've lived in for some or many years. And those whose incomes, frankly, don't match the cost of housing for many of the reasons Ms. Pedrini described. It's expensive to live here because it's a very popular place to live because of its natural splendor. It's an expensive place to do development because if you're not in the floodplain, you're on the hillside, and there's not as much labor. It's a lot different than from a cost perspective than the city. And there's higher risk to developments, particularly developments that are of a type and scale that would deliver residential affordable housing. So that's those are where the challenges are. Some of the tools we're looking at using in the village of Pemberton, and I'll probably jump around to what's on the next slide. Actually, let's go back just a little bit, Lisa. Some of the tools that we're looking at using, if you had P for previous. There we go. So there's a range of responses that we're looking at from the municipality, and probably the biggest tool that the municipality has in the absence of lots and lots of money is trying to negotiate affordable housing through its development powers. So when someone wants to develop a project in the municipality, pretty much anything beyond a single family house, they usually have some interaction with the municipality. If they're subdividing land, if they're rezoning land from one use to a higher density use. And that puts the municipality in a position to work with the development community through a range of tools available to secure and deliver affordable and attainable housing. There are certain agreements that the municipality can use to bind a project to a certain level of affordability. There's now zones that can be applied to ensure that a rental project is zoned for rental housing. That's a very new power that was just given to municipalities in the last couple of years. And so those are the sort of tools that we're going to dive into a little deeper tonight. One of the other ones I'll just mention, and Ms. Reese will be speaking to it in more detail, is that the overall land framework for how we plan the growth of the community has a really big impact on affordable housing. If we had a community, say, for example, like West Vancouver, where there's a preponderance of single family homes on larger lots, those drive up land values. If we looked at a place that was very high density, it may not meet community values, but it would be more affordable. And that's the conversation that we're hoping to start tonight, is how do we shift things around so that if we do, there's an opportunity to consider affordability as part of that overall land use planning framework. Okay, let's move on to some of the things that the village has been doing to tackle affordable housing. So some of the work done to date, there was an affordable housing work program that fell out of two pieces of work that the village had funded called the Age-Friendly Affordable Housing Needs Assessment, which was basically a scan of where the housing gaps are in the community. And the Age-Friendly was part of the funding program, but the study, if you access it through the village website, does go broader. It identified more housing needs than just the Age-Friendly. So it really applied to all ages and all housing types. From that, there was an action plan that was put together by the same consulting team that looked at what are the sorts of tools the municipality could use. So it was, again, a fairly high level description of things like zoning and contracts and amenity negotiations and these complicated esoteric things that we often get into when we talk about the development approvals process. Falling out of that, there was a housing need, an affordable housing work program completed. And that what that did is it took some of the higher level age-friendly affordable housing action plan recommendations and really put them in the context of the village of Pemberton. So what are specific actions in Pemberton? Where are we going to start? What are we going to achieve in the short, medium, and long terms? Okay, next slide, please, Lisa. And there's been a fair bit of work that's been done so far, particularly around the amenity policy, which is the last bullet on this slide. So what that means is that when a developer comes in for a rezoning to rezone land from one use to a higher intensity of residential use, it opens up an opportunity for the municipality to discuss amenities. What that really means is that the rezoning decision that the council grants on a residential project amounts to an increase in value of the land to the owner or the developer. And from that, there's a conversation around what portion of that or how some of that may be gifted back to the municipality. So we've rewritten a policy which takes into account the cost of development in this region, as well as the lift or the amount of value increase in land, and tried to look at how affordable housing factors in. Going back to the top of the list, what we're starting tonight is something called a housing option study. So what we've talked about doing is looking at what we have in Pemberton now as available housing stock and looking at where there may be gaps, or maybe there's some ingenuity that can be applied without fundamentally disrupting the form of the community. And Ms. Reese is going to go through some interesting ideas around how we could do that. But are there other ways that we can get more heads on beds in the community, either in existing neighborhoods or in rethinking how we build new neighborhoods? That feeds into a larger official community plan review. So as we talk about housing options, we're starting a conversation around the future growth of the community, and the OCP will talk about where we grow and how we grow, what the values are the community are around growth, including affordable housing as one of the premier ones we suspect. Another piece of work that again shows how the municipal powers can be used to promote affordable housing is that anytime someone builds a new building in the village, or does a larger project, does a larger subdivision, there's something called a development cost charge, which is basically a per unit or a per lot fee that the developer has to pay to the community to help offset the cost of infrastructure in the community. There is an opportunity in that bylaw to reduce or eliminate those specific charges for projects that are affordable. Again, when we are challenged to deliver affordable housing, one of the challenges is that it costs a lot of money to do development. And so the province has given the municipality some tools to look at keeping those costs under control, at least to the extent that the municipality influences those costs, to ensure that there's a higher degree of affordable housing. And that's pretty much it for me, I believe.
I'm going to stop sharing, and Joanna Reese will continue with her portion of the presentation. So
Thanks, Lisa. Right. So one of the ways the village can help create more housing options is by increasing the permitted density in new and existing neighborhoods. Housing density is measured by the number of housing units per lot size. Increasing density can provide a mix of housing options and increase the number of people that can live in Pemberton while contributing to vibrant and walkable communities. When thinking of increasing housing density, people often imagine tall apartment buildings. However, it can also be achieved subtly with a variety of housing types that meet the size and scale of a single family home. To begin, let's take a look at what housing types are currently permitted in Pemberton. Each property in the Village of Pemberton has a zone established by the zoning bylaw, which regulates how the property can be used, where a building can be located, the building's maximum height and size, and other provisions as necessary. Zones differentiate between the type and size of housing that can be built on a property. Currently, the following housing types are permitted depending on the zone: detached dwellings or single-family houses, duplexes, side-by-side and stacked townhouses, apartments, mixed commercial and residential buildings, and mobile homes. In some zones, in addition to a single-family home, a secondary suite or a carriage house is also permitted. In the following section, I will review housing types that can provide options between a detached house and an apartment and can be designed to fit within existing building patterns. A duplex is a residential building containing two separate dwelling units, either placed one above the other or attached by a common wall, each with a front door and direct access to the outside. As mentioned, duplexes are already permitted in some zones. Duplexes can be integrated among single-family homes to match the existing neighborhood character and scale. The option to develop and strata title a duplex increases the options available to potential homeowners who may not be able to afford a single-family home. Alternatively, duplexes can be appealing for families seeking a mortgage helper, as well as multi-generational families looking for a two-family home. However, there are a number of challenges to convert an existing single-family home into a duplex. As a result, the creation of duplexes would apply primarily to new builds. Houseplexes are buildings that contain 3 to 4 small separate units designed to look like a large single-family house or to be architecturally compatible with the surrounding neighborhood. Houseplexes allow new residents to access neighborhoods that were previously inaccessible due to finances or maintenance requirements. Additionally, the character and architecture of a houseplex are intended to match the neighborhood and can significantly reduce the appearance of increased density. Providing off-street parking is one of the most challenging issues with houseplexes, especially given that there may not be enough space for rear parking. Additionally, the construction costs are higher to meet the BC Building Code requirements for a multi-unit building, and similarly to duplexes, the creation of houseplexes would primarily apply to new developments rather than the conversion of existing houses. In this next section, I'll be providing an overview of different types of accessory units. Accessory units are in addition to a larger principal residence, such as a single-family home, duplex, or even a townhouse. Types of accessory units we will look at today include carriage homes and garden suites, tiny houses, suites and duplexes, and lock-off suites. Accessory units have a number of potential benefits, including increasing the supply of rental housing in new and existing neighborhoods, acting as a mortgage helper, making home ownership more affordable. They can support intergenerational living used for aging family members, adult children, and caregivers. And some forms of accessory units also provide an opportunity to increase the number of housing units without making significant changes to the streetscape. As I describe the different types of accessory units, I will also highlight the potential challenges that are specific to each type. Carriage houses and garden suites are types of detached accessory units that are located on the lot of a single-family home. Carriage houses are attached to or above a garage, where garden suites are standalone units. In Pemberton, carriage houses are permitted on larger properties in Sunstone and the Ridge, and garden suites are not permitted. There are a few potential challenges to building these types of units. They may not be welcomed by neighbors in existing neighborhoods who may have concerns regarding parking, privacy, shading, and construction. Unlike a secondary suite, they can't be reabsorbed if needs changed. They're permanent structures and they aren't easily removed if they're no longer wanted. They can also be expensive to build as they retain the more expensive elements of housing and can be more costly when navigating infrastructure in existing neighborhoods. While units in carriage houses can be situated above a garage, garden suites on the valley floor would face the added challenge of needing to be above the flood construction level. Tiny homes are a permanent dwelling intended for full-time living, often built on a flat deck, therefore movable and mobile, or they're built on a standard foundation. They're typically less than 400 square feet and include the basic amenities of a permanent home, including a kitchen, washroom, and sleeping area. If tiny houses are mobile, then they must adhere to transportation rules, being no wider than 10 feet and no higher than 13.6 feet. Tiny homes are a relatively new form of housing that aren't specifically addressed in building code policies. As a result, they often struggle to meet the BC Building Code size requirements. Mobile tiny homes do not fall under the BC Building Code, which also presents a challenge to regulate them within local government. The challenges to regulate tiny homes by local government can make it difficult to find a suitable location and to connect to services. In Pemberton, they would also need to be situated above the flood construction level. Lastly, compared to other housing types, it may be harder to secure loans to build mobile tiny homes and to obtain insurance to protect them from theft, fire, or floods. A secondary suite is a separate dwelling unit that is contained within a larger primary dwelling. Currently, secondary suites are not permitted in duplexes, only in single-family homes. Some of the challenges of adding suites to duplexes increase the parking requirements of a duplex, which can be difficult to meet or would reduce green space on the property. It can also be costly to retrofit an existing duplex to build a secondary suite. As a result, this option would benefit new development of duplexes rather than applying to existing housing stock. And once again, suites cannot be located below the flood construction level. Lastly, lock-up suites are secondary suites that are located in apartments or townhouses, similar to a hotel room with a kitchenette and typically less than 300 square feet. The requirements for this type of suite, including a second kitchen, lockable doors, and fireproofing standards, add to the construction cost. As a result, the overall purchasing prices tend to be higher. Buildings with lock-off suites will also likely encounter issues with being able to supply adequate parking. Finally, the hidden nature of these suites may make poor rental practices more likely on behalf of landlords. While accessory units have a number of benefits, such as increasing the supply of rentals, acting as a mortgage helper, supporting intergenerational living, and providing hidden density, they do each also have potential challenges that need to be navigated. So after gaining an understanding on the variety of housing types that can provide more housing options, we would love your input to learn more about which housing types you think are a good fit for Pemberton. Next, Vinka will show you how you can provide your input using the Have Your Say Pemberton page. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joanna. So as Lisa mentioned, my name is Vinka Hutchinson and I'm the Communications and Grants Coordinator at the Village. So for those of you who haven't had a chance to visit our new engagement website, this is it. Hopefully you can all see that. So the address for the new engagement website is haveyoursay.pemberton.ca. You can also access it from the Village of Pemberton website or from our Facebook page. So I'm just going to show you some of the key features of the site. So when you land on the homepage, the first thing that you'll see is this large register button right in the middle. So we'd like to encourage all of you to register. This will give you access to all areas of the website. So you'll be able to complete surveys, you'll be able to share your story, ask questions, that sort of thing. It's really easy to register. So you click on this button here. You'll complete your username, your email address, your password, where you live. If you live in the village of Pemberton, you'll then need to select your neighbourhood. If you're not sure what your neighbourhood is, we do have a map here of all of the different neighbourhoods that you can click on, and you can choose your neighbourhood from there. So then you just click register. So I have already registered for the site previously. So up in the right-hand corner here, I'm going to click on sign in. And I've saved my password, so it's nice and easy. So now that you can, now up in the right-hand corner, you'll see that my username is displayed, which means that I'm signed in. So if you scroll down on the homepage, you'll see the current village projects. So affordable housing is here, and I'll take you through that page in just a moment. We also have a couple of other projects, the official community plan review that Cameron mentioned earlier. If you scroll further down the page, you'll just see some helpful links at the bottom here. So you can join our Village of Pemberton e-newsletter if you haven't done so already, or you can visit the Village of Pemberton website. So taking you through to the affordable housing page, we just click this Learn More button. This is the affordable housing project page. This has all the information about the affordable housing project. We have a little introduction section here. The first tab on the left-hand side here is the survey tab. So as Joanna has mentioned, we would love your input on affordable housing. If you complete the survey, you will go into the draw to win a $25 gift voucher for a Pemberton business of your choice. So the survey is now live. We would encourage you, after this session has ended, to jump on the website, complete the survey, go into the draw to win that voucher. The next tab here is share your story. So again, if you're registered and signed in, you can tell us what affordable housing looks like to you. That is public, so everyone will be able to see that. The next tab here is Pemberton Now. So this is just a pulse check, really. It just tells you what the situation currently is in Pemberton. And the last tab here is Ask the Village. So this is where you can ask your questions to our team. If you submit a question here, that will be emailed to our team, and we will respond within 5 business days. So on the right-hand side of all of our project pages, we've also got some handy things here. We have an events section, so you can see what events are coming up, our project timeline, so you can see what has taken place so far, where we're currently at, and any future stages of the project. We also have a document library. Now that document library on the affordable housing page contains a lot of the documents that Cameron mentioned earlier. So if you're interested in taking a look at those, make sure you click on those. The last section here is who's listening. So that's just the contact details of our team. So that's it from me. Again, I would just encourage you, once the session's finished, to jump onto the affordable housing page and complete that survey and go into the draw to win that gift voucher. So back to you, Lisa, for Q&A. Oh, I think you're still on mute there, Lisa.
There we go. All right. Okay, so at this point, let me just check the time. We are at 6:46, right on time. So we have about 15 minutes to take questions. And if, as I mentioned earlier, if we can't get to all your questions, or if you wake up in the middle of the night with a burning question, you now know from Vinka's presentation on how to reach us. You can jump on our Have Your Say Pemberton website, register, access the survey, access the Ask the Question, or if that all just sounds way too technical, you can give me a call, you can send me an email. So lpedrini@pemberton.ca